So I want you to picture the sensory overload of just walking down a narrow, hyperkinetic street in a Vietnamese coastal town right around dusk.
Oh, yeah, the atmosphere there is just incredible.
It really is. The air itself has this physical weight to it. It's this thick coastal humidity that's kind of competing with the low-hanging, almost sweet scent of charcoal smoke and obviously the exhaust of 1,000 motorbikes.
Right, you can't escape the motorbikes.
Exactly. So you're navigating past these incredibly low plastic tables, and you turn a corner, and instantly you are hit by a literal wall of heat rolling off an open-air cooking station.
Visually, it's a lot to take in all at once.
Totally. Your eyes are drawn to these massive, vibrant, neon green mountains of fresh foliage just piled on woven trays. But, before you even process the herbs, before your brain even registers the smell of rendering pork fat and toasted aromatics, your ears pick up this sound that completely dominates the alleyway.
It is a sound that essentially commands your central nervous system to pay attention, honestly.
Yes, it's so distinct.
Once you understand what that noise signifies in Vietnamese gastronomy, it triggers this immediate Pavlovian response.
Because it's not like a gentle simmer, right? It isn't the soft, polite bubbling of a Western sauté pan.
No, not at all.
It is an aggressive, percussive, almost violent crackle. It's the exact acoustic signature of a highly hydrated liquid making instantaneous contact with smoking hot atomized oil.
The physics of that sound are actually fascinating when you really break it down.
Oh, I bet. What's actually happening there?
Well, you are hearing the immediate vaporization of water. So when liquid hits oil that is hovering right around its smoke point, the water doesn't just boil. It flashes into steam so rapidly that it microscopically shatters the batter.
Oh, wow. So it's basically exploding on a tiny scale.
Exactly. It creates this whole network of tiny craters and crusts. That violent acoustic reaction is really the heartbeat of what we're dissecting today.
And that aggressive sizzle is basically the perfect entry point into today's deep dive. We are completely deconstructing an absolute titan of Vietnamese cuisine.
But which is long overdue, honestly.
Right, because if you browse through international travel guides or, poorly translated restaurant menus, you will almost universally see this dish reduced to an incredibly lazy label.
The translation issues are so frustrating.
They always call it a Vietnamese savory crepe or like a crispy pancake.
Which is such a tragic linguistic flattening of a highly engineered food system.
A crepe just sounds so delicate.
Yeah, calling this a crepe implies this kinship with French patisserie, right? Like a soft, elastic blanket made of wheat and milk and eggs, which is just meant to gently cradle a filling.
Right, a totally different vibe.
The dish we are discussing shares absolutely no genetic material with a crepe, neither in ingredients nor in its structural philosophy.
I mean, the crepe comparison implies dairy. It implies butter melting in a mild pan, but in this golden, shatteringly crisp crescent moon, there is zero dairy. And there is zero egg. The structural integrity relies on an entirely different set of botanical and chemical rules. We're looking at a dish that evolved out of brutal agricultural necessity and somehow transformed into a masterpiece of culinary engineering.
It really is an interactive, multisensory system, one that actively leverages human biology, digestion, and even the ancient philosophy of equilibrium.
Which is a lot for a so-called pancake. So to really grasp the sheer ingenuity of this dish, I feel like we have to look at the name itself.
Absolutely. The language tells you exactly what the priorities of the culture were when this dish was codified.
Right, so it is called bánh xèo. Let's look at the linguistics of that, starting with bánh.
It's a very versatile word.
It really is a brilliant catch-all term in Vietnamese. It doesn't translate neatly to just one English word. It encompasses cakes, breads, noodles, dumplings, essentially like any food architecture built on a foundation of pounded or milled starch.
But the second half of the name, xèo, is where the identity of the dish truly lives.
Because it's a sound, right?
Pure onomatopoeia. It is the phonetic spelling of that exact violent sizzle we just described.
It literally translates to sizzling cake. I mean, it would be like an American diner naming a burger the grease crackle.
That's a great way to think about it.
The culture didn't name the dish after the pork or the shrimp or even the vibrant yellow color. They named it after the thermal reaction in the pan. To me, that suggests the physical technique, the manipulation of extreme heat and oil, was always far more vital to the identity of the dish than whatever proteins happen to be available to throw inside it.
You nailed it. The technique is the constant, and the ingredients are just the variables.
Which makes sense historically, right?
Yeah, you see why that had to be the case when you trace the agricultural history of the Vietnamese people. This entire culinary philosophy was birthed in these massive, life-giving river basins.
The deltas.
Exactly, the Red River Delta in the north, and later on, the Mekong River Delta in the south. The foundation of survival, economics, and culture in these regions is just entirely built on rice.
And specifically, varieties of rice that could withstand intense monsoons and provide multiple yields a year.
Right. So you have these ancient farming communities with an absolute abundance of rice, but they are engaging in this back-breaking, calorie-depleting labor in the paddies all day.
So they're burning insane amounts of energy.
Exactly. They needed a mechanism to transform their baseline carbohydrate, which was rice, into something highly caloric, instantly satisfying, and capable of utilizing whatever small proteins they could forage for the immediate environment.
So whatever was lying around.
Exactly. If you caught a few small river shrimp in your nets, or if you had like a sliver of preserved pork belly, or even just some wild mushrooms, you needed a starchy vehicle to stretch those proteins into a restorative meal.
Which perfectly explains why the precise origin of the dish is so heavily debated by food historians. I mean, when a food is born out of rural survival, rather than dictated by some rigid, written royal decree from an emperor's kitchen, it mutates.
It has to mutate to survive.
Right. It adapts to whatever microclimate it finds itself in.
The historical evolution of Bánh Xèo actually maps perfectly onto the migration patterns of the Vietnamese people.
How so?
Well, the most compelling historical through line starts in the central region. If you look at the ancient Champa Kingdom, which controlled the central coast of modern-day Vietnam for centuries, their culinary traditions heavily featured small, dense, savory cakes made from rice flour.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they were cooking in smaller clay or heavy iron vessels, utilizing the specific local coastal catches.
So you have this ancient, kind of more compact ancestor of the dish existing in the central provinces, but then you have this massive demographic shift in Vietnamese history.
The Nam Tien, or the southward expansion.
Right.
Beginning around the 11th century, but really accelerating into the 17th century, settlers pushed south into the Mekong Delta. And the Mekong Delta is a completely different ecological universe compared to the harsher, storm-battered central coast.
It's way more lush, right?
Incredibly fertile. It's this sprawling alluvial plain. The soil composition is just overwhelmingly rich, so the settlers suddenly found themselves in a landscape exploding with vast tropical orchards, labyrinthine river systems teeming with fish, and, crucially, endless groves of coconut palms.
Oh, the coconuts. The environment completely rewrote the blueprint of the food.
Absolutely did.
They didn't just bring the recipe with them, they reverse engineered it for the tropics.
Yeah.
They took that small, dense central rice cake and they scaled it way up.
They essentially supersized it.
Yeah, they thinned out the batter, they expanded the cooking vessel, and they started utilizing the rich, fatty coconut milk that was suddenly just growing right above their heads. The geography physically expanded the dish into the massive, paper-thin, crispy sunburst that international diners are most familiar with today.
It is environmental adaptation served on a plate, really.
I love that.
But regardless of whether you are looking at the ancient central style or the expansive southern style, the fundamental architecture, what you call the culinary system earlier, remains constant. Every variation of this dish relies on a deeply specific orchestration of chemistry and biology.
Well, I want to completely deconstruct that architecture. Let's isolate the outer shell, the batter itself.
The first pillar.
Right. If we are explicitly ruling out eggs, which we are, how does the batter achieve that hyper-radiant golden yellow color? Because, to a Western palate trained on omelets and crepes, a yellow folded pancake just screams egg yolk.
It is a masterful visual deception achieved through botany. The color is derived entirely from ground turmeric root.
Turmeric. And it isn't just a food dye, right? Turmeric is doing real work in the pan.
Oh, absolutely. The active compound in turmeric, which is curcumin, is fat-soluble.
Okay.
So when the turmeric-laced batter hits the intensely hot pork fat in the wok, the curcumin blooms. It physically binds with the lipids.
Wow, okay.
And this does two things. It disperses that brilliant golden hue evenly throughout the starch matrix, and it transforms the flavor of the turmeric from raw and slightly dusty to this warm, deep, earthy aromatic that fundamentally grounds the high-flying savory notes of the meat.
That is so cool. But the structural skeleton holding that golden color together is the rice. And I understand traditional vendors are not just like ripping open a plastic bag of commercially milled rice flour and whisking it into tap water.
No, no. There is a whole physical process here that is vital.
Walk me through it.
Well, commercial dry milling generates a lot of heat, which can actually damage the starch granules in the rice, resulting in a gritty texture. The traditional method is wet milling.
Wet milling.
Yeah, cooks take raw, long-grain rice and soak it in water overnight. This hydration process allows the water to completely penetrate the hard crystalline structure of the rice endosperm.
So it softens it up.
Exactly. When they grind that softened rice with fresh water, often using heavy stone mills, they aren't creating a dough. They are creating a delicate, silky liquid suspension.
A suspension, meaning the hydrated rice particles are physically floating in the liquid, just waiting for heat to lock them together.
Yes.
And that liquid medium is where the regional geography re-enters the chat, doesn't it?
Precisely. In the central regions, where the focus is on a snappy, pure crunch, they stick to pure water.
Because it just evaporates.
Right. Water evaporates rapidly, leaving behind a hard starch network. But down in the south, in the Mekong, they replace a significant portion of that water with fresh coconut milk.
Which introduces an entirely new chemical dynamic because coconut milk isn't just water. I mean, it's packed with saturated plant fats and natural sugars.
And those coconut sugars undergo a rapid Maillard reaction when they hit the hot pan.
Ah, browning.
Yes, creating deeper, more complex browning on the crust. And the coconut fats interfere slightly with the starch bonding, which creates a texture that is shatteringly crisp on the very edges, but maintains a rich, delicate, almost lacy chew closer to the center.
That contrast sounds amazing. And right into that golden, milky suspension, they heavily scatter very thinly sliced green scallions.
The inclusion of the scallions directly in the liquid batter is a highly intentional aromatic strategy.
It's not just a garnish.
Not at all.
Yeah.
When the batter is cast into the smoking wok, the scallions on the bottom layer make direct contact with the oil. They flash fry in a fraction of a second. Before the batter even sets, the pan is flooded with the scent of deeply roasted alliums.
Oh man, I can smell it. Now, there is a modern modification to this ancient batter that absolutely fascinates me because it feels like a street food vendor accidentally discovering advanced food science.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Today, a lot of cooks will swap out a little bit of the water, or coconut milk, for a splash of unflavored carbonated soda water or even a light lager beer.
It is an ingenious application of thermodynamics. When you introduce a cold carbonated liquid into a batter that is about to be subjected to extreme heat, you are playing with gas expansion.
The carbon dioxide trapped in the beer or soda.
Yes, exactly. The moment that batter hits the 400-degree oil, the CO2 bubbles rapidly expand and try to escape. As they force their way out of the liquid, they create thousands of microscopic air cavities within the starch matrix, just as it is gelatinizing and hardening.
It basically aerates the pancake from the inside out in a matter of seconds.
It's brilliant.
I love this because it is the exact same underlying physics you see in like a high-end Japanese tempura kitchen using ice-cold sparkling water or a British pub making beer-battered fish. You are creating a structural foam that shatters when you bite into it rather than a dense, heavy crust.
It takes the natural crispness of the rice flour and pushes it into an almost impossible state of lightness.
So that is the science of the golden shell. But a shell has to hold something. And the savory filling inside this dish is not a delicate, minimalist garnish.
Definitely not.
It is highly caloric, aggressive comfort food. We are talking thin slices of pork belly, whole freshwater or coastal shrimp, massive handfuls of raw mung bean sprouts, steamed whole mung beans, and caramelized white onions.
Every single item in that filling is executing a specific mechanical or textural duty.
Let's break that down.
Take the pork belly. You don't use lean pork loin here. You need the belly because of the distinct strata of muscle and thick, soft fat. As the thin slices of pork hit the searing metal, that fat renders. It liquefies.
It melts right into the cooking oil, meaning the batter isn't just frying in generic vegetable oil, it's frying in heavily infused savory pork fat from the inside out.
Exactly. And the white onions are subjected to that same heat, breaking down their sharp sulfur compounds and rapidly caramelizing their natural sugars.
Which gives it that sweetness.
Right. Which provides a deep, savory sweetness that bridges the pork and the shrimp perfectly.
Okay, I have to stop you at the shrimp. because this is where my own culinary hubris completely backfired on me.
Oh, no. What happened?
I tried to make a version of this dish at home years ago. I looked at the tradition of using small whole shrimp and keeping the shells entirely on, and I thought, well, that's just a rustic shortcut. Right. I followed the rule, left the shells on, cooked my pancake, and it was a textural nightmare. Biting into the shrimp felt like chewing on sharp plastic or fingernails. It completely ruined the dish. What did I get wrong? Like, why does leaving the shell on work for a vendor in Saigon, but it failed so miserably in my kitchen?
It is a brilliant example of how technique dictates texture. The failure wasn't the ingredient. The failure was the thermodynamics of your pan.
I just didn't get it hot enough.
Exactly.
Okay.
The shell of a shrimp is made of chitin, a fibrous substance. If you gently saute chitin or cook it over medium heat, it becomes pliable, rubbery, and incredibly unpleasant to chew.
It bends instead of breaking.
Yes. But the street vendors are operating at a thermal extreme. They're dropping those shell-on shrimp into a wok that is literally wisping smoke.
So they are thermally shocking the shell.
They are flash frying the chitin. At those extreme temperatures, the molecular structure of the shell rapidly dehydrates and alters. Instead of becoming rubbery, the shell becomes highly brittle. It effectively turns into a potato chip. So when you bite into a properly executed banchao, the shrimp shell doesn't resist your teeth. It shatters. It provides a massive structural crunch that echoes the crunch of the rice batter.
It's an intentional amplification of the texture. And I imagine you also get a massive flavor concentration by keeping the shell.
Oh, a huge percentage of a crustacean's flavor, the deep oceanic umami compounds, are locked right in the shell. By frying it whole, you release those compounds directly into the cooking fat.
That makes total sense. Now, to balance out those loud, aggressive crunches of the shell and the crust, you have the steamed mung beans inside.
Right, the whole mung beans are the great textural mediator of the dish. Because they are pre-steamed, they are soft and highly starchy.
They calm things down.
Exactly. In an environment composed of rendering fat, shattering crusts, and snapping shrimp, the mung bean acts as a quiet, nutty creaminess. It absorbs the ambient pork fat and physically binds the slippery bean sprouts and the proteins together inside the fold.
It's basically a symphony of engineered textures, but this brings us to a massive physiological problem.
The fat load.
Yes. If you take that dish, a massive crescent of rice starch, fried in rendering pork belly fat, studded with whole fried shrimp and creamy starch, and you just put it on a plate, you'd tap out after 3 bites.
It's undeniably delicious, but the lipid load is overwhelmingly heavy. Your stomach would just rebel.
Right.
If you ate the pancake in isolation, it would be a culinary failure. It would just be overwhelmingly rich. And that is the most crucial revelation for anyone studying this cuisine. The pancake itself is only exactly half of the dish.
It's like serving a bowl of cereal without the milk. It is functionally incomplete.
Which brings us to the botanical counterweight, the herb basket, or rau sung.
The third pillar.
Yes. And if you are an international diner sitting down at a Vietnamese restaurant for the first time, this is where your brain misinterprets the data. The waiter drops off a massive overflowing plate of raw leafy greens and herbs next to your sizzling pancake. The Western instinct is to look at that and think, oh, how nice, a side salad to eat before the main course, or like, look at that excessive pretty garnish. Viewing the rau sung as a side salad is a profound misunderstanding of Vietnamese gastronomy. Those greens are not a side dish. They are not a garnish.
What are they?
They are an active, non-negotiable, structural packaging material, and more importantly, they're a highly evolved biological delivery system for digestive enzymes.
The packaging is the medicine. That's insane. Let's walk through this forest of foliage, because the sheer biodiversity on a single plate is staggering. You don't just get iceberg lettuce. You get a highly specific layering of botanical tools. Let's start with the foundation leaves.
You need a broad leaf to act as the physical wrapper. Butter lettuce is common. It provides a soft, pliable, neutral cushion that protects your hands from the blistering heat of the fried pancake.
Because you eat it with your hands.
Exactly. But the far more interesting foundational leaf is the mustard green.
Mustard greens have this incredibly sharp, aggressive, almost horseradish-like bite.
And that bite comes from glucosinolates, which are organic compounds in the plant. When you chew a raw mustard green alongside a piece of fat-soaked pork belly, those sharp, bitter compounds actively stimulate your salivary glands.
Really?
Yes, and they signal your liver to produce bile, which is exactly what your body needs to emulsify and break down heavy dietary lipids.
That is wild.
The bitterness is literally jump-starting your digestive tract to handle the fat load.
That is incredible. The plant is doing the heavy lifting for your stomach. And once you have your base leaf, you start layering on the aromatic herbs. You have Vietnamese perilla, which has these gorgeous purplish leaves with serrated edges. It brings this earthy, almost cinnamon mint aroma.
And you have the more aggressive medicinal herbs. Fish mint, or the chameleon plant, is a prime example.
Oh, that one is intense.
It is highly polarizing for first-time eaters because it has a distinct, tangy, almost metallic, fish-like herbaceousness. It contains deconoic acid. In traditional medicine, it is prized as an intense digestive aid and anti-inflammatory.
You also layer in Thai basil, which owes its signature sweet anise-like flavor to a compound called estragol, and Vietnamese mint, which isn't actually in the mint family at all, but brings this lingering, spicy, peppery heat.
And if you travel down into the rural delta, the herbs become entirely hyperlocal.
What else do they use?
You might be served rice paddy herb, which thrives in flooded environments and hits your palate with this wild, bright cross between sweet citrus and roasted cumin. Or you might get young wild mango leaves, which are intensely sour and astringent.
And the astringency literally dries out your mouth, which physically scrapes the slick pork fat right off your palate. It is a palate cleanser built into the wrapper of the food. I mean, think about a Western fast food burger for a second.
It's the total opposite.
Right. The meat is heavy and fatty, and what do we wrap it in? A dense, highly processed carbohydrate bun that just adds to the sluggishness. In this system, the bun is a crisp lettuce leaf loaded with raw, hydrating, fat-cutting botanical medicine.
But to permanently fuse the hot, rich, oily pancake with the raw, cooling, bitter herbs, you need a chemical bridge. You need a liquid unifier.
The fourth pillar, the dipping sauce, Nuoc Cham. It is the golden elixir of the cuisine.
No bite of this dish is consumed without being entirely saturated in this liquid. And the construction of a proper Nuoc Cham is a masterclass in amino acid and acid-base balancing.
You start with the foundation, which is premium fish sauce.
Which is essentially liquid umami. It is the result of fermenting anchovies with sea salt for months or even years. The fermentation process breaks down the fish proteins into free amino acids, primarily glutamate.
It's an intensely salty, deeply savory baseline.
Right, but straight fish sauce is too harsh. So the cook introduces warm water and a heavy dose of pure cane sugar. The sucrose dissolves and completely rounds out the aggressive salinity of the fish sauce, pulling it from harsh to gently sweet.
So once the salt and sugar are locked in equilibrium, you introduce the bright, volatile acids, freshly squeezed lime juice, or the highly floral juice of a calamansi or kumquat. The citric acid cuts entirely through the sugar, preventing the sauce from becoming syrupy.
Then you float the aromatics on top. Minced raw garlic, which adds a sharp sulfurous bite, and thinly sliced red bird's eye chilies.
For the heat?
The capsaicin from the chilies bleeds into the acidic liquid, creating a creeping ambient heat. Finally, you drop in shredded carrots and daikon radish that have been lightly pickled in vinegar.
The pickled daikon act as tiny sponges. They soak up the fish sauce and provide sharp, acidic crunches that interrupt the liquid texture of the dip. When you plunge your herb-wrapped pancake into this bowl, you are coating the entire package in a liquid that hits sweet, sour, salty, savory, and spicy receptors all simultaneously.
It's a perfectly engineered bite.
Now, we've established this universal baseline. We have the starchy shell, the rich protein filling, the medicinal herb basket, and the acidic umami dip. But what makes studying this dish so endlessly fascinating is how this exact biological system mutates based on its zip code.
Geography changes everything.
The execution changes wildly across the map. Let's look at the three primary regional expressions, starting in the Deep South.
The Mekong Delta style is the version that most of the world associates with the name. It is a spectacle of abundance.
We are talking about literal saucer-sized pancakes. They can easily be 40 to 50 centimeters in diameter.
Massive.
To create something that large and that thin without it shattering into a million pieces during the fold, you really have to look at the cookware.
They require massive, specialized, shallow woks. The thermodynamics of a wok that large are essential. It creates an enormous surface area for the batter to spread out incredibly thinly. Because there is so much surface area exposed to the ambient air, the water in the batter evaporates almost instantly, leaving behind that iconic, lacy, web-like border that looks like a golden sunburst.
And because the Mekong is arguably one of the most agriculturally abundant places on Earth, the fillings just lose all restraint.
Oh, completely.
Pork and shrimp are just the beginning. You will see vendors folding in rich duck meat, foraged wild mushrooms, the tender inner heart of a coconut palm tree, or even slices of cassava root. The environment is so rich that the dish just absorbs whatever is blooming that day.
Now, geographically and philosophically, contrast that immense, decadent southern sunburst with the central style. If you travel north up the coast to regions like Quang Nam, Da Nang, or the ancient capital of Hue, the dish physically shrinks.
It goes from a 50-centimeter giant to a small, intimate disc, maybe 15 to 20 centimeters across. And the cooking vessels change from massive woks to these small, flat, heavy cast iron molds.
The use of thick cast iron is a deliberate choice for heat retention over a smaller surface area. The batter formulation changes entirely too.
No coconut milk, right?
Exactly. The Central Coast historically didn't have endless coconut groves, so they used pure water and rice flour. No coconut milk, no added sugar.
Which fundamentally changes the texture. Without the coconut fat interfering, the water evaporates and leaves a pancake that has a crisp edge, but a much thicker, softer, almost chewy, mochi-like center.
It feels heartier.
Sometimes the pancake is so soft they don't even use lettuce leaves. They just tightly roll the entire thing inside a sheet of translucent, dry rice paper.
But the most profound regional shock comes when you look at the sauce bowl in the central region.
Oh, yeah.
You are not dipping this in the clear, sweet and sour fish sauce we just described. In places like Da Nang, they serve a dense, opaque, incredibly rich dipping sauce called nuoc leo.
This sauce is wild. It is a heavy emulsion made from ground pork liver, roasted peanuts, toasted sesame seeds, and fermented soybean paste.
It is an absolute umami bomb. When you look at the history of the central region, which historically endured brutal typhoons, harsher winters, and poorer soil quality compared to the Delta, you see a culinary reliance on deep preservation and dense caloric efficiency.
They needed the energy.
Fermenting soybeans and utilizing organ meats like liver maximizes the savory depth and nutritional density of the meal. They didn't have the sheer volume of ingredients that the South had, so they packed maximum flavor into a smaller, denser, richer package.
It is literally a map of the region's climate and economic history, readable purely through the texture of the batter and the viscosity of the sauce.
Truly.
And if we move to the northern adaptations around Hanoi, you find this very pragmatic middle ground.
The northern palate historically favors clean, subtle, balanced flavors over extreme sweetness or heavy fats. The pancakes are medium-sized. They strictly avoid the sweet coconut milk of the South.
They often incorporate slices of taro root into the filling. Taro is highly starchy and earthy, and it absorbs the pork fat beautifully without adding sweetness. The North is heavily focused on the crispness of the shell and the absolute freshness of the lettuce wraps, dipping it into a much milder, more diluted, and less sugary fish sauce.
It leads to an important culinary taxonomy question, actually.
Which is?
If the central version is a small, chewy disc made without coconut milk and dipped in a heavy liver and peanut emulsion, is it even the same dish as the giant, sweet, crispy, coconut-laced southern sunburst?
Right. I mean, did they just share an ancestor 1,000 years ago and evolve into totally different culinary species? It's like asking if a house cat and a tiger are the same animal.
Well, they belong to the same genus. They share the same genetic DNA. The rice starch suspension, the turmeric bloom, the rapid searing technique, the raw herbal counterweight, and the interactive tactile consumption.
That is the immutable core of banqiao.
But just as Darwin observed finches adapting their beaks to different islands, this dish adapted its size, its fat content, and its umami delivery system to survive and thrive in wildly different ecological realities.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. But whether a vendor is pouring batter into a massive wok in the humid Delta or a small iron pan on the breezy Central Coast, the physical act of cooking this dish is a high-wire act of thermal engineering. I want to break down the sheer mechanical choreography required to get this dish out of the pan and onto a plate.
Watching an experienced street vendor manage this process is hypnotic. It is an intense, high-pressure performance.
Oh, totally.
A master vendor is usually operating 4 to 6 of these bubbling cast iron pans simultaneously over open charcoal or high-pressure gas burners. It requires total sensory immersion and deeply ingrained muscle memory.
The cooking happens in seconds, but we can slow it down and isolate the mechanics into 5 distinct maneuvers.
Let's do it.
The choreography begins with maneuver 1, heat and sear. The chef places the empty metal pan over a roaring flame until it is literally wisting smoke. The metal has to be screaming hot.
If the pan isn't hot enough, the rice starch will just glue itself to the metal.
Right.
The chef adds a slick of oil, or rendered lard, immediately followed by the raw pork belly slices and the shell on shrimp. We discussed the cuisine in the shrimp shell, rapidly dehydrating, but the pork is equally important here.
What happens to the pork?
The intense heat causes the pork fat to immediately render. It liquefies and mixes with the cooking oil.
The pan is now coated in boiling, savory pork fat. This triggers maneuver 2, the shay.
A namesake maneuver.
Exactly. The chef takes a ladle of the thin, yellow liquid suspension, gives it a quick stir so the rice flour hasn't settled at the bottom, and pours it directly into the center of the smoking fat.
That is the moment of the violent sizzle. But the chef doesn't have time to listen to it. The instant the liquid hits the pan, the chef must execute a rapid, fluid flick of the wrist, lifting and swirling the entire wok in a wide circular motion.
They are literally using centrifugal force. By swirling the pan, they force the liquid batter to ride up the sloping superheated sides of the metal wok. Gravity instantly grabs the excess liquid and pulls it back down toward the center.
This physical motion creates a structural gradient. The batter that clung to the upper edges of the wok is microscopically thin. The water evaporates instantly, creating a lacy, fragile, shatteringly crisp border.
And the center.
The batter that pooled back in the center is slightly thicker, providing a flexible structural base that can actually hold the weight of the fillings without tearing.
It is brilliant engineering achieved with a simple flick of the wrist. As soon as the swirl is complete, they execute maneuver 3, top and cover. While the center batter is still liquid and violently bubbling, the chef throws a massive handful of raw bean sprouts and the pre-steamed mung beans over exactly 1/2 of the circle. Then, they slam a tight-fitting metal dome or lid over the pan. They leave it there for roughly 60 to 90 seconds.
This is where the thermodynamics become incredibly complex.
How so?
By sealing the pan, the chef is trapping the evaporating water from the batter and the ambient moisture from the raw bean sprouts. The environment inside that dome instantly becomes a high-pressure steam chamber.
So you have 2 completely different cooking methods happening simultaneously in the exact same pan.
Yes.
The bottom of the pancake is aggressively frying via dry heat in the pork oil, developing that hard maillard crust. But the top of the pancake and the vegetables inside are being gently cooked by moist steam.
Exactly. The steam cooks the raw top layer of the starch so it isn't gooey, and it flash heats the bean sprouts, just enough to cook away their raw, grassy flavor, but quickly enough that they don't break down and lose their internal water pressure. They remain crisp and juicy.
A literal thermal high-wire act. At the 90-second mark, we hit maneuver 4. Uncover and render. The lid is ripped off, releasing a massive plume of steam. The chef evaluates the crust. To ensure it absolutely shatters, they might take a small squeeze bottle and trickle a tiny border of fresh oil right along the rim of the pan.
That new oil seeps down between the hot metal and the dehydrated starch edge, effectively deep frying the border for the last few seconds. As the last microscopic drops of moisture evaporate from the batter, the edges of the pancake will physically contract and begin to curl away from the pan on their own. It signals that it is ready to be released.
Which brings us to the finale, maneuver 5, the fold. The chef takes a flat metal spatula, slides it effortlessly under the empty golden half of the circle, and folds it over the mound of pork, shrimp, and steamed sprouts, creating a perfect bulging crescent moon. It is immediately slid onto a plate and rushed to the table.
The entire sequence, from the raw pork hitting the pan to the final fold, takes less than 3 minutes.
This is so fast.
And the vendor doesn't use a timer. They're cooking entirely by sensory input. They listen to the pitch of the water evaporating to know when the batter is dry. They watch the curling of the edge. They smell the exact moment the pork fat hits its smoke point.
It reminds me of watching a master glassblower or like a blacksmith. You aren't just baking a cake in a static, predictable oven. You are manipulating extreme temperatures, utilizing centrifugal force to dictate thickness, and simultaneously managing dry heat frying and moist heat steaming in a 2-minute window. It requires profound, ingrained physical intelligence.
And after all of that intense thermodynamic manipulation, this blistering hot golden crescent is dropped onto your low plastic table, flanked by the forest of herbs and the bowl of dipping sauce.
Which brings us to the mechanics of consumption. Because if you have never been exposed to this culinary system, the arrival of the plate can be legitimately confusing. You look at this oily stuffed pancake, you look around for a knife and fork, and you wonder how to attack it.
Using metal cutlery to eat bánh xèo is missing the entire point of the dish.
Right.
It is intentionally designed to bypass utensils. It demands that you eat it with your hands, transforming the passive act of chewing into an active, tactile, creative craft. You become the final architect of the dish.
Let's walk you through the exact chronological ritual of building the perfect bite. It starts at the foundation. You reach into the communal herb basket and you select a broad outer leaf, let's say a large peppery mustard green. You lay it completely flat across the palm of your hand. Your hand literally becomes the plate.
That leaf is your canvas. Next, you apply the aromatics. You don't just dump them on, you curate them.
You're building a flavor profile.
Exactly. You tear off a leaf of earthy perilla, you pluck a sprig of sweet Thai basil, maybe a single leaf of the aggressive fish mint. You layer these directly in the center of the mustard green.
Now comes the extraction. You use your fingers or chopsticks if the pancake is literally too hot to touch to tear off a jagged, bite-sized chunk of the golden crescent. And you have to be highly strategic here. You are prospecting for gold. You need to ensure your pinch captures a jagged piece of the crunchy edge, a slice of the rendered pork, a whole brittle shrimp, and a tangle of the steamed sprouts. You place that hot, oily, savory payload directly onto your bed of raw herbs.
Next is the structural compression. You take the edges of the mustard leaf and you roll it tightly, folding the ends inward to encapsulate the hot filling. You are creating a compact, highly pressurized green cylinder.
You take that tight bundle, you submerge it halfway into your bowl of nuke chum, making sure to scoop up some of those pickled daikon threads, and then, well, you take the bite.
The sensory collision that occurs in your mouth in that exact second is the entire reason the dish exists.
It is absolute chaos, but highly organized chaos. But beyond just being a delicious contrast of hot and cold, crunchy and soft, this exact ritual, this specific way of eating, is actually a physical manifestation of deeply entrenched philosophical and medical concepts. It isn't just about taste, it is about human biology and the ancient philosophy of em dum, or yin and yang.
It is critical to understand that in traditional Vietnamese culture, yin and yang is not some abstract mystical concept. It is a highly practical, applied science of biological homeostasis. Yes. The philosophy dictates that health is achieved when the body maintains a perfect equilibrium between cooling properties, which are yin, and warming properties, which are yang.
And warming and cooling don't just refer to the physical temperature of the food coming off the stove, right? It refers to how the chemical compounds in the food physically react inside the human metabolic system.
Precisely. Let's look at the yang, the warming elements in this dish. You have the intense caloric energy of the rice starch. You have the heavy, saturated pork fat and cooking oil. You have the turmeric, which is considered a warming medicinal root.
And the spices?
Right. You have the pungent raw garlic. And crucially, you have the capsaicin in the red chilies, which is a literal vasodilator that increases your heart rate and makes you sweat. All of these elements introduce intense heat and stress to the digestive system.
If you just ate the yang, your body would fall out of equilibrium. You would feel lethargic, heavy, and overheated. So the cuisine mandates the immediate introduction of yin.
The massive volume of raw, leafy greens, the water-dense, hydrating lettuce and bean sprouts, the sour, sharp citrus juice in the dipping sauce, the bitter medicinal compounds in the mustard greens. These elements physically cool the metabolic engine, promote rapid digestion, and soothe the stomach lining.
The dish is literally regulating your biology in real time. Because of this strict adherence to umduang, you can sit on a plastic stool in 90-degree heat, eat a massive plate of deep-fried pork batter, and walk away feeling completely energized and light. The packaging is neutralizing the fat.
And that pursuit of total balance extends from the stomach directly to the tongue through another foundational concept, nguyen, or the 5 elements. The philosophy dictates that a truly masterful dish must stimulate all 5 fundamental human flavor receptors in a single bite. Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water correspond to sour, bitter, sweet, spicy, and salty.
It sounds like a poetic checklist, but when you actually analyze the physical act of chewing that herb bundle, you experience those 5 elements chronologically. It isn't a jumble, it's a precise sequence.
Let's break down that chronological sequence. When the herb bundle first touches your tongue, the very first thing your brain registers is the liquid coating the outside of the leaf.
The acid, the sourness, or toin. The lime juice from the dip hits your palate first. It is an immediate shock that wakes up your salivary glands and prepares your mouth for food.
Exactly. As your teeth break through the outer leaf, the second element hits. The bitterness, or kohl, from the mustard green and the medicinal herbs. That sharp, astringent flavor clears away the acid and provides a clean, dry palate.
Then your teeth hit the core of the bundle, the hot tan cake. This triggers the sweetness, or cam, but it's a complex sweetness. It's the natural oceanic sweetness of the shrimp meat, the caramelized sugars of the white onion, and the rich coconut milk trapped in the starch.
As you chew, the aromatics release their oils, introducing the spiciness, or tan. The lingering burn of the crushed chili and the sharp sulfur of the raw garlic begin to radiate in the back of your throat.
And finally, as you swallow, the entire experience is anchored by the saltiness, or fin. The deep fermented umami resonance of the fish sauce and the rendered pork belly lingers on your palate, urging you to build the exact same bundle and start the process all over again. Acid, bitter, sweet, spice, salt, every single receptor is fired in a 2-second window.
It is a masterpiece of sensory engineering.
Which raises a really fascinating question about the originators of this dish. Do you think the ancient farmers and early settlers in the Mekong Delta hundreds of years ago were actively sitting around a fire, consciously thinking, oh, we need to stimulate the metal element to balance the fire element? Or did this dish just organically evolve this way because the human body intuitively craves and demands that kind of biological homeostasis?
It is the ultimate chicken and egg scenario of traditional foodways.
It really is.
It is highly likely a synthesis of both. Traditional medicine, agriculture, and daily survival were completely interwoven. When a farmer spent 10 hours in the blistering sun, they intuitively felt sluggish and overheated. They didn't need a medical textbook to tell them they craved cooling, hydrating, bitter herbs alongside their heavy rice and fat.
They just felt it.
They ate what made their bodies feel capable of waking up and working the next day. Over centuries, what felt biologically restorative became codified into strict culinary tradition. The philosophy provided the vocabulary for the intuition, and the intuition validated the philosophy.
The body knew what it needed, and the culture built a framework to ensure they never forgot it. It is absolutely brilliant. And what is so striking to me, having deconstructed all this science and history, is how profoundly unique this system is to Vietnam, especially when you consider that the core concept, a savory pancake, is perhaps the most universal culinary idea on the planet.
Almost every agrarian culture on Earth figured out the same basic premise. Take a complex carbohydrate, mill it into a powder, hydrate it into a liquid batter, and apply it to a hot, flat surface to create a portable, calorie-dense meal.
Right.
But how a culture executes that universal premise reveals their deepest environmental and philosophical priorities.
Let's do a quick global comparative analysis, because when international travelers first eat bánh xèo, their brains desperately try to map it onto a pancake they already understand. The most ubiquitous global comparison, likely due to colonial history, is the French crepe.
The comparison is historically loaded but chemically flawed. A French crepe relies entirely on wheat flour, which means it relies on the development of a gluten network. Furthermore, the batter is heavily fortified with animal proteins, eggs, and cow's milk, and cooked in dairy butter.
So different.
The thermal goal is a gentle, even heat to create a soft, delicate, slightly elastic blanket. It is designed to be pliable. And crucially, it is eaten entirely on its own, perhaps folded over a filling, but consumed purely as a carbohydrate package.
It is a soft vessel. Then you look to Japan, and you have okonomiyaki, which literally translates to how you like it, grilled.
Another masterful dish, but again operating on entirely different structural rules. Okonomiyaki uses wheat flour and eggs, but it is incredibly dense. The shredded cabbage and proteins are mixed directly into the batter before cooking. It is cooked slowly on a griddle into a thick, heavy cake, and then smothered in rich, opaque toppings like mayonnaise, sweet sauces, and bonito flakes.
It's intense.
It is a dish designed for maximum density and comfort. It is unwrapped and unapologetically heavy.
Or we travel to South India and look at the magnificent dosa.
The dosa is much closer in spirit to our Vietnamese subject. It rejects wheat entirely, utilizing a batter of rice and lentils. Crucially, the dosa batter is fermented overnight, introducing wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria that give it a distinct sourdough tang.
Right.
It is spread incredibly thin on a hot tawa with ghee or oil to achieve a stunning, shattering crispness. And while you do tear it with your hands and dip it into highly complex wet accompaniments like coconut chutney or acidic sambar, it still lags the final defining evolutionary leap of the Vietnamese system.
Exactly, because when you line up the crepe, the okonomiyaki, and the dosa against our golden sizzling bánh xèo, the Vietnamese dish stands entirely apart in its architecture. It shares the gluten-free rice base of the dosa, but it uses turmeric for visual vibrancy instead of relying solely on Maillard browning. It uses high-heat vegetable oil or rendering animal fat instead of dairy butter. But the absolute defining characteristic, the thing that makes bánh xèo an anomaly on the world stage, is that it completely subverts the role of the carbohydrate.
In every other global example, the cooked carbohydrate is the dominant wrapper. In the Vietnamese system, the heavy fried carbohydrate is relegated to being the filling inside a wrapper made of raw, living botanical leaves.
That is the perfect way to articulate it. A French crepe is a soft, warm blanket, and okonomiyaki is a dense, savory cake. But bánh xèo is essentially a delicate, shatteringly crisp taco where the crunchy shell is made of violently fried rice starch, and the soft tortilla holding it all together is a raw mustard green. It completely flips the universally accepted ratio of cooked carbs to raw vegetables.
It is a salad that uses deep-fried pork batter as a crouton.
A giant, golden, shrimp-studded crouton. When you step back and look at the sheer density of information we have covered today, the journey of this dish is just staggering. We started with the brutal reality of rice farmers needing a way to efficiently consume calories and stretch meager protein scraps.
And we watched how the geography of a nation, the expansion from the harsh, storm-beaten Central Coast into the lush, coconut-heavy alluvial plains of the Mekong Delta, physically morphed the dish from a small, dense cake into a massive, paper-thin sunburst.
We broke down the intense, fiery choreography of the street vendor, the utilization of centrifugal force to dictate batter thickness, the thermal shock of flash-frying Keaton to make shrimp shells shatter, and the brilliant engineering of slamming a lid over smoking oil to simultaneously steam raw vegetables while deep-frying a starch crust.
And we explored the ancient, deeply practical philosophies that dictate how the food is consumed. The biological necessity of balancing the intense, heavy yang of rendered pork fat with the cooling, digestive yin of bitter mustard greens and acidic lime juice, ensuring that every single bite perfectly stimulates the 5 elemental flavor receptors on the human tongue.
It is so much more than a meal. It is a biological tool. It is a historical record of migration. It is an engineering marvel disguised as cheap street food. And perhaps most beautifully, it is a masterclass in communal eating.
The physical act of building those lettuce wraps with your hands, tearing the pancake, passing the herb basket back and forth, it inherently forces a slower, more interactive, more connected dining experience. You cannot eat this dish while staring at your phone. It demands your physical presence.
Whether you are sitting shoulder to shoulder on tiny plastic stools on a buzzing, motorbike-filled pavement in Saigon, or gathering around a cramped table in a coastal kitchen, the ritual of the wrap brings people together. It bridges cultural divides through the undeniable, universal language of extreme sensory pleasure.
There is a profound, unifying joy in smelling that roasted pork fat, in feeling the snap of the fresh lettuce, and in hearing that violent, percussive crackle from the wok.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a challenge, a new lens through which to view your own dinner plate. The next time you encounter a seemingly simple street food, whether it is a taco in Mexico City, a slice of pizza in Naples, or a traditional pancake in your own hometown, refuse to accept it at face value. Look a little closer at the architecture. Ask yourself, what centuries of agricultural struggle, what massive regional migrations, and what deeply ingrained philosophies of human biology are hidden inside that simple dough? What traditional comforting dish in your own culture is actually hiding a highly complex, scientifically engineered system designed to keep your ancestors alive?
Once you start looking at food as an edible historical document, the entire world opens up. You realize that true culinary genius isn't found in a Michelin-starred kitchen. It's usually found in a bustling alleyway born out of necessity.
It absolutely is.